In this particular segment, we're going to go further with our discussion of the Moynihan report. Last week, we were able to discuss the first subheading in the first chapter, and it talks about the end of the beginning. This particular video, we'll be looking at the demand for equality. That's the next subheading. But as always, before we get into the next subheading, let's review to see what it is that we can learn from the subheading before. So now let's do that. And remember now, the title of the subheading is the end of the beginning. And so that particular subheading is broken into three main topics. Political events, administrative events, and then legal events. And so those three topics comprise the whole of the subheading. So now let's get into some of the things that we discussed. As far as political events, the first one we discussed is how the report makes mention of the extraordinary organization that African Americans took on in order to try to gain equality. And the report makes it clear that that kind of organization has not been seen from that time back in any other group who are trying to obtain certain rights and privileges. And then we have the second topic that we discussed under political events is the Kennedy Johnson administration put the full backing of the federal government behind trying to obtain equality for its African American citizens. And then the third thing that we discussed is in 1964, the election of Lyndon B. Johnson. It almost was a public notice that the rest of America was ready to face these issues also. And so they had political events that took place that really put the civil rights movement in a good light. And it was time to try to put some things in place to try to ensure that equality was for all citizens. So now the next group that we'll discuss, these events are nationwide events. These are things that happen everywhere. And so the first thing that we discussed is the President's Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity. And so what this particular committee did was it enacted the power behind the Manpower Opportunity Act. And so what it did was now we're trying to get individuals trained in order to enter into the workforce. Now, when I refer to my notes, it mentions there that the Manpower Development and Training Act of 1962 was being enacted. And so that it was a major national effort to try to redress the profound imbalance between the economic position of Negro citizens and the rest of the American public. So now that's one of the things that we discussed. And then the next thing that we discussed is the Economic Opportunity Act of 1964. And so this particular act was once again a nationwide effort to try to end poverty. It was an effort where individuals in the United States who fell below the poverty line were given aid so that they could maybe live better. And in this particular instance, especially have the food that they needed in their homes to feed themselves and their children. All right, now we'll go to the last and final topic, legal events. And so now in the legal events, we see that one legal event stood out above all, and that's the Brown versus the Board of Education, which happened in 1954. But actually, the report helps us to appreciate that that whole decade was one where the Supreme Court made it their position that they were going to attempt to try to strike down any legislation that might be biased. Any legislation that might cause a unequal division among the residents of the United States, the citizens. The United States would not be divided by these things because the Supreme Court was taking a hand in making sure that any legislation that came down was for the benefit of all of the citizens of the United States. All right. So now that's our review. We see that some momentous things have taking place. But now we're going to get into what I call the methodology of what it really means to have equality. Equality in itself means different things to different people. So what does equality mean in the Moynihan report? Well, let's get into it. So now what we first see is under the demand for equality, under this particular subheading, we see now that after having done all of those things, let's get to the first page here. After having done all of those things that we discussed, the political events, the administrative events, the legal events, now we're faced with another set of difficulties. Another set of difficulties. We've made a good start. So what are the difficulties that we're going to talk about? Well, one of the things is because of the fact that what's about to happen now, it can't be set in stone as to what's right and what's wrong, because it all has to do with the perception of things. So what do I mean? So now, when you talk about liberty, freedom, the movement now has shifted to becoming not only about freedom or liberty, but also about equality, right? So now, I know what you're thinking, but liberty and equality should be synonymous, shouldn't they? Shouldn't they mean the same thing? Well, in this case, and in a lot of cases, that's not the truth. So as we go on, we come to find out that liberty and equality are two of the fundamental ideals of American society. But it's odd because in some instances, not only are they not the same thing, but they're diametrically opposed to one another. They're in opposition to one another. And I know that sounds odd, but let's keep going. Let's keep going. Because the report mentions that there are many who would gladly give their lives for liberty, but they would be appalled by equality. They'd be appalled by it. And then it goes on to say that a lot of people who have stake in liberty are having difficulties with coming to grips with what it means to have equality also. So now the more popular ideal, by and large, is liberty, right? The ability to have choice, the ability to have freedom. And then equality is secondary. Now, this is all according to the report here. It says that equality has enjoyed tolerance more than acceptance. So liberty is preferred, equality is tolerated. Now, isn't that a thought? So let's go forward. Let me get my notes together here. Okay, so now that particular, I would say, difficulty, that particular difficulty that exists in trying to reconcile the two, really is summed up in a quote from the report. It says, Lincoln freed the slaves, but they were given liberty, notice this, not equality. You see that? So, in essence, what he was saying was that, or what the report is saying, that even though liberty and equality are the two ideals on which American society is based, Lincoln only did half the job. He only provided liberty. But was it within his power to provide equality? Well, that depends on how you look at equality. Now, as we go on further in the report, we find out that there is a quotation by Faulkner. Now, what Faulkner is doing, he's trying to, in essence, sum up what it means to have equality. He's trying to sum up what it means for a person to experience equality and what that would look like. Now, notice this quotation. He says, there is no such thing as equality per se, but only equality to equal rights and opportunity to make the best one can of one's life within one's capability, without fear of injustice or oppression or threat or violence. So, what are we looking at? What is Faulkner? What is he defining? Equality of opportunity, which means that everyone gets a spot at the starting line. Before the race begins, everyone gets a spot at the starting line. But now, according to what he said, you operate based upon your own capabilities. Now, you have the right to run the race, but you have to operate within the race from your own capabilities. So if you're not the fastest runner, then having a guaranteed spot at the starting line does not mean you're going to win the race. It just means you have the opportunity based upon your capabilities to run in this race. Okay? So now, as the report continues, it mentions that it is increasingly demanded that the distribution of success and failure within one group be roughly comparable to that within other groups. So now this is something that's totally different from what Faulkner was describing, right? Equality of opportunity is totally different from equality of outcome. Okay? So why do we say that? You can't guarantee the equality of outcome. You can't guarantee that. It's impossible. And I say that forthrightly because based upon what Faulkner mentioned, everyone's capabilities are different. They're different. Strengths that I have, you don't have. Weaknesses that I have, you don't have. My response to certain situations, based upon what I've gone through in the past and based upon my own mental characteristics and makeup, they provide sometimes obstacles to me doing well, whereas you might not have those obstacles. So how is it that you can guarantee equality of outcome? The more reasonable approach would be to guarantee the opportunity or the equality of opportunity. Yes, you had an opportunity to run in this race. Yes, you had an opportunity to use your full capabilities, all your faculties in order to win this race. But I cannot guarantee you that just because you started at the starting line that you will be number one when the race is over. And I think that's a logical premise to proceed with. Okay, let's go further. So now, here is where semantics come in. And I say semantics because different phrases mean different things to different people. And this report makes this clear. Now notice, when speaking with individuals who may be of the white community, notice what equality of opportunity means. It mentions here that equality of opportunities has been generally perceived by white Americans as a demand for liberty, a demand not to be excluded from the competitions of life. So their perception is, don't exclude us. If there are things that have to be done and I have to compete in order to be successful, don't exclude me. So going back to our original illustration, don't bar me from being able to start at the start line. Don't prevent me from doing that. I don't have any problem with competing. I don't have any problem with running. Just don't prevent me from entering the race so I can run. That's their perception. It goes on to say, liberty does, of course, demand that everyone be free to try his luck or test his skill in such matter. So you see that? If you're trying your luck, if you're testing your skills, the outcome is not predetermined. It's not. It's not one that has already been written. So when you say the equality of opportunity, you're saying basically everyone is allowed to try. Everyone gets that chance. Okay? But now, as it mentions in the report, it makes a profound statement. Equality of opportunity almost ensures inequality of results. Let's look at that again. Equality of opportunity almost ensures inequality of results. Why do we say that? Once again, because everyone is different. The capabilities of everyone is different. And so if you guarantee an individual the opportunity, then that means that you cannot guarantee the outcome. You can't. In a group of individuals, if you guarantee that each one has a spot at their starting line, you can't guarantee that each and every one that you've given a spot at their starting line will be the first to finish that race. You just can't do it. You can't do it. And so here is a point of difference between the two communities, between the white community and the African American community. Let's keep going though. So now the report goes on to say that there's a point of semantics that's different, as we mentioned, because equality of opportunity has also taken on equality in terms of outcome. Now the report references Bayard Rustin. It says something that it quotes something that he said. It said it is now concerned not merely with removing the barriers to full opportunity, but notice this last part, but with achieving the fact of equality. And so what Mr. Rustin is saying is that now the focus is on a distribution of achievements among Negroes roughly comparable to that among whites. And that is equality of outcome. So it's no longer concerned with the fullness of opportunity, like we just talked about, right? The equality of opportunity, being able to line up at that starting line, right? But what the focus is now is shifted. It's saying now that not only do we want the opportunity to compete, but we want the outcome, the results to be just like this group of people. So the same results that they're having, we want to have the same results. And we want that to be provided for us, right? Now remember, in this part, as I mentioned, we're talking about the deeper meaning behind what's expected. And so we are referring directly to the report. Some of the things that are said in the report you might not agree with, but we are covering this information to make sure that we understand what the report says and how we can benefit from it. I just want to remind you of that, okay? So now it goes on to give us another quotation from Nathan Glazer. Notice what he says. The demand for economic equality is now not the demand for equal opportunities for the equally qualified. Powerful statement. He says it is now the demand for equality of economic results. The demand for equality in education has also been a demand for equality of results of outcomes. So as we mentioned, we're torn now. We're torn between two things: the equality of opportunity and the equality of outcomes. So Mr. Glazer is making it clear that now the demand is for equality of outcomes, right? In an economic way, but then also when it comes to education, we're saying that one group is saying that they want the same results and outcome as this other group. Equality of outcome. Okay. So now, some aspects of law, as the report mentioned, are geared toward providing equality of opportunity, right? And it references as an example the public accommodations of the Civil Rights Act. That's geared toward equality of opportunity. And then it goes on to talk about some other programs, the manpower retraining, Job Corps, the community action. All of those are the instances where the equality of opportunity is becoming more strong, I should say. So the federal government is looking at these particular instances to provide more opportunities, but they're not geared toward the equality of outcomes. You're given an opportunity to do the things that you need to do. The outcome rests on the individual, right? So now, your report makes it clear that even with all of those accommodations, they cannot ensure equality of outcome because they were not built for that particular purpose. They were built to provide access, opportunity, not to ensure outcome. So now this particular subheading ends with a powerful paragraph, and we're going to read it verbatim. It says, the principal challenge of the next phase of the Negro Revolution is to make certain that equality of results will now follow. Now notice this caution at the end of it. If we do not, there will be no social peace in the United States for generations. So this is where really the fight begins. This is where it begins. And we say that in review because when we looked at the subheading as a whole, right? We had political, administrative, and legal events that were put in place. But what were those events geared toward? They were geared toward liberty, right? Freedom. And they were also geared toward equality, but a certain kind of equality is being espoused here. And so as we went through this particular subheading, we noted that there were two kinds of equality that were outlined. We have the equality of opportunity and the equality of outcome. Can we define them both? We'll most certainly try. Equality of opportunity is, as we used in the illustration, is the ability for anyone to come up to the starting line, but based upon your own capabilities, as Faulkner defined it. You get to try, right? You're not prevented from entering the race, or as the report mentions, the competitions of life. You're not prevented from entering into those competitions and using the capabilities, the skills that you have in order to run that race successfully. You're not prevented. Everyone gets an opportunity to try. But now, the equality of outcome is the notion that you get the right to be a part of the race. You get the right to come to the starting line. But then also you have the right to expect a outcome that's similar to another runner, right? And in this particular instance, the other runner is white America. And so the report makes it clear that what is being looked at, what is being expected, is that the same results that individuals have in white America needs to be mirrored in the African American community. That's the definition of equality of outcome. Which one do you think is more logical? To ensure that an individual has the ability to run the race, or to ensure that the individual has the ability to run the race and win it? Which one do you think is something that is more agreeable? And that's what the basis of this particular subheading was about. The demand for equality. What does equality mean to you? What did it mean to the movement? Well, we discussed it in length today, and I'm thankful that you came back. And next week we're going to continue with our discussion. We're going to continue to move forward discussing the Moynihan report. But now, one thing I found very, very interesting in looking at this particular subheading for this week, the statement that was made about President Lincoln, how he freed the slaves, but then he couldn't also grant them equality. He couldn't. And so what he did was he gave them an opportunity now to enter the race, the competitions of life. And then I saw also that there was a bit of semantic difference in the way that the white community looked at the equality of opportunity and the way that the African American community looked at it. There was a difference in semantics. White America felt that this was just a equalizing of the playing field that allowed them all to start at the finish line. That's all they wanted, according to the report. When that notion was brought to their minds, or when that notion comes up to them, it means a different sort of thing than it did in the African American community. In the African American community, it meant that I have the right to run this race, and then I'm ensured that I'm gonna have the same results while I'm running that another group has. And so therein lies the conflict between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome. So as I mentioned, we're going to go on. The next subheading is the end of chapter 1, and that subheading is entitled The Prospect for Equality. So as always, man, I hope that you enjoyed our little discussion. We're going to continue to make sure that we understand what the Moynihan report was all about and what benefit we have. So please like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, man, be easy.